Okay, we're holding on the fifth chelek, the fifth part of Yesodot Ben Adam Lechavero, the essentials of interpersonal relationships. The first part of that series is the part that deals with husband and wife, man and woman relationships. In the past few weeks we discussed the different roles that men and women have. It's important to get to know each other, and in the next coming weeks, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll be talking a little bit more about that, more in depth, about how different men and women are, not just because of the differences in gender, but in many other ways. We spoke about how to find that ideal match, the Ben Zug or the Bat Zug, because finding him or her would make a big difference in the marriage, because our tradition says that there's one individual out there who can complement us and not only make our life a wonderful life, but contribute in a very significant way. What they have, we may be lacking. What we have, they may be lacking. So the two complement each other, and by joining forces, they are able to build a home successfully. Not to say that other two people cannot do so. As long as there's some degree of compatibility, anybody can get along. But that there is that one individual that hopefully, if we have the zechut of meeting him or her, is just a much better match and would work out much smoother. Then we spoke about the importance of marriage for those who have yet to be convinced. They've seen other people struggle through it. They've seen, unfortunately, others ending up in divorce. Or they are learning from the goyim that it's not a bad idea to live together instead of getting married, or just not marry at all. So we discussed the importance of marriage and what we have to gain from it. There's a lot to gain from it. We also need to speak about how to preserve the marriage. In other words, once we find our soulmate, once we build a home, what we need to know to preserve that home. Things change. You are in love, you're happy when you're engaged, when you meet this person, you're confident that this is the one. But things change, people change. And it would be a good idea for us to be equipped with the tools before getting married, than learning after the fact. So there should be less surprises and less misunderstandings. As I've said before, I wish I knew what I know today 19 years ago. It would have made a little bit of a difference, maybe a lot of difference. Nevertheless, it's never too late to learn. This topic that we're going to be covering tonight, we cannot exhaust it. It's not impossible for us to cover it in one night. It will take us maybe 2 or 3 weeks to cover all of it, because we will be talking about the ingredients that make for a successful relationship, what pitfalls to avoid, and at some point later on, what to do if, chas v'shalom, things have gotten so out of hand, they've deteriorated, how to restore the peace. And on the 25th, B'ezrat Hashem, 2 weeks, I believe, we'll be discussing something that you may never have heard from anybody, at least who's Orthodox, and that is the astrology of human relationships. That is what I meant by getting to know one another better on a deeper level. Also would greatly help us understand what human beings are all about, how they are different, and how they are special, each one in their way. So let's begin with the Midrash, a very interesting Midrash that says, Harbe poshrim layam veruban chozrim, yachidim hem sholchim velo chozrim. There are many people who set out to sea. The majority of them come back from their trip. There are some who fail, who unfortunately don't make it back. And the Midrash says, in the same way, it is true with marriages. The majority succeed, but there are some that fail. What the Midrash was really talking about is not marriage per se. The Midrash is referring to a man who marries a woman who's not good. This has something to do with sotah, a woman who betrays the trust of the marriage, the covenant that they've made. And these things can happen. We're all humans, we make mistakes. But that could be a terrible mistake. So there are some that make this mistake a very destructive mistake. So even though the Midrash is speaking about a sotah, or a man marrying a woman that is not a good woman, the idea behind this Midrash is still the same. It can be applied to marriages as well. Back then at least, the majority of marriages succeeded and only some failed. Today's statistics are showing that at least 50% in the non-Jewish world are failing. Baruch Hashem, those who are observant Jews know some of the ingredients or have a little bit of what it takes to preserve that marriage. And even for those of us who have the ingredients, it's one thing to know about what the ingredients are, another to actually apply them. I very much recommend to hear lectures, to hear cassettes on this subject. There are quite a few by some excellent rabbis, experts in this field. They help, but they can only help one if one is willing to help himself. One really wants to learn, one really wants to improve and preserve that marriage, then he will hear this good advice. There are techniques out there, excellent techniques on what to do in all types of situations that arise. And every marriage and every home, every relationship is different. Nevertheless, despite the differences, there are some basic rules. And that's what we'll cover tonight. Some of the basic rules on how to succeed in a relationship and not to fail, Chas v'Shalom. So number one, the most important thing before you set out and get married is hopefully you have the desire to succeed. And I think most people do. Have you ever met somebody that does not have a desire to succeed? Who would want to fail? But it's important to keep that in mind all the time, because even though you have that in mind when you're engaged, yes, I want this to be a great marriage. And you know what some people are thinking out there, some singles? That they are hoping that this will turn out to be better than the marriage of their parents. Because they may have grown up in a home where the husband and wife, the father and mother didn't get along that well. And they're saying, Bezat Hashem, this is not going to be my house. In my home, it's going to be a good home, a healthy home. I'm going to give my children the love and the warmth, not what I have seen. They say that, but do they fulfill it? Not necessarily. Why not? Because they forget what the matara is, what the tachlit, what the ultimate goal is. And the goal is to succeed. But we get lost in our routines, in our daily routines, and we find things that appear to be important in our lives, like making money, etc. But Chas v'Shalom, there's nothing more important than one's marriage. But we forget that. So to begin with, we all hopefully want to have the desire to succeed, and that's very healthy. But it's important to continuously remember that. I want to succeed. And when somebody says that and he's convinced of that, then hopefully he will do whatever it takes to succeed, even if it's difficult. Because there will be difficulties. Some will have more, some will have less, but there will be difficulties, and I'll tell you soon why. So number one, there has to be a clear objective. This is what I want to do. This is the home I want to build, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to build it, to have a successful relationship. I'm willing to learn from others, whatever it takes. This will be priority number one. By nature, it just happens to be that some people get along, and there's nothing that they need to do. They just like each other. We'll talk about that in 2 weeks from now, why that is so. That's nature. Very little that you need to do. You may not be spending too much time with them, and that's why it's working, but nevertheless, there is glue. In marriage, no matter how much glue there is, and no matter how good the chemistry is, we are told that it requires investment. You need to invest. If you don't invest in it, it will not blossom as much as it can. Mashal lema davar domeh, what is this compared to? To landscaping. I go from time to time to the nursery, especially during the fall, when the tulip bulbs are available, or the orchids, or regardless, whatever your favorite flower or plant is. And I pick up a bag with 3 or 4 bulbs in them. The first thing I do is read the instructions. This one belongs in the sun, not in the shade. Make sure that you plant them several inches apart. make sure that you dig a hole which is not too deep and not too shallow. Make sure that you plant it, if you're planting it outside, during these months of the year. Make sure you use a certain amount of fertilizer. Make sure it receives enough water. You see all these instructions for what? Just to have these flowers grow and to blossom and to look beautiful. They need maintenance. If you don't maintain your garden, it won't look good. Marriage is much more than just landscaping for the following reason. What do you do if you've done everything? You follow the instructions on how to plant, and all of a sudden there's a cold spell, or there is a very powerful wind. All your tulips and flowers will dry up or will be blown away, right? There's nothing you can do to protect them unless you put them in a greenhouse, unless you bring them indoors perhaps. If you want to have it outside, there's nothing you can do. That's beyond us, that we have no control over that. Marriage, if there is a big storm, ishet re'eu ya'azoru, then one can help the other. Tovim hashnayim min ha'echad, the fact that the two are together, if they work together, they will be able to weather any storm. And you know what? Many families go through many storms. And these storms take a toll on them, an emotional, a physical, a mental toll. Poverty, unemployment, disease, difficult children, and a very common one, a tough mother-in-law. Sure. Yeah, it can take a toll. Because it can create a rift between the husband and wife. Either it's her or it's me. I'm sure you've heard of this before. So, it's like flowers, but it's much more serious than flowers. You need the two. The two need each other to weather storms. And there are storms. Another reason why it's important to invest in the marriage is because, as we've spoken about it in the past, the two are very different. Man and woman are just different. Their nature is different, their temperament can be different, and their background can be different. Many times, just about all the time, a couple brings into the house de'ot kdumot, hergelim, in other words, certain habits and certain traits that they've picked up in their home, and they're bringing it along with them into their new home. And that may not be completely compatible with the husband's background. So there can be challenges. And because of these challenges, there may be hardships in getting along. Even though they liked each other when they were dating and everything seemed fine, yes, but now you're really living together, not just dating. And all these things all of a sudden surface, things that it would be impossible for you to see, to observe, to experience when you're dating. So since these things will surface, guaranteed, it will require investment to maintain it. So how do we go about building a successful relationship? A Beit Ne'eman b'Yisrael. I'm going to give you several rules, but before I give you the rules, I will tell you one thing. What is it that people want out of a relationship? Anybody know? They want to be happy, right? They want shalom, they want peace. Why is it that they want peace? What's more important than peace of mind? To be able to trust someone, to be able to love someone, to be loved. These are basic things that every human nature craves for. And this is the beracha that every Chatan veKala get underneath the chuppah. Sason v'simcha, Chatan veKala, Gila, Rina, Ditza v'chedva, Ahava v'achva, Shalom v're'ut. Why these 10? So the Zohar says, because Be'asara ma'amarot nivra ha'olam. The world was created with 10 ma'amarot, 10 sayings, 10 decrees of Borei Olam. Hashem could have created the world with one ma'amar, with one instruction, with one declaration. Sheyeh olam, let there be a world. But He created the world with asara ma'amarot, 10 declarations, in order to remind us how important every part of this creation is. It's all by design, it all has a purpose. There should be light, the stars, the plants, everything has a purpose. Every one of those ingredients are important. Gila, Rina, Ditzava. All of those are important. And this is what we have to aim for. This is what makes one happy. If one develops and attempts to acquire these things in his home, this is what will bring about the ultimate happiness. But in order to achieve happiness, one has to be happy himself. If one is not happy himself, how will he make somebody else happy? If the whole idea of marriage is to achieve happiness, what do you start? Well, you start by being happy yourself and not waiting for the other one to make you happy. And that's one of the mistakes that people make, is that they're expecting that the other should make them happy. Be happy yourself. If you'll be happy, you'll have what it takes to make another person happy. I'm going to come back to this a little bit later on how one becomes happy. But before we do that, I want to discuss 3 rules, 3 important rules that the Torah advises us, directly or indirectly, that are important to keep in mind. There are other rules. As I said before, there are quite a few techniques, and I will be sharing with you just a few tonight, a few of the ideas and some of the rules. Rule number 1 is what the Torah says. Al ken yazov ish et aviv et imo v'davak b'ishto v'ayu lebasar echad. Therefore, man should leave his father and mother. He doesn't say he should abandon them, but he should leave that household and concentrate on building his new home. V'davak b'ishto, and he should form a bond with his wife. What do we see? What do we learn from this pasuk? Several things. Number 1, focus. The Torah tells us, leave your parents' home. What for? Because you need to focus on your home. You can't focus on 2 places at the same time. Focus on your home. That is where the center of all affection should be. That is where the center of attention should be. Number 2, the Torah is talking to parents too. Don't interfere with your children's life. Many good marriages are destroyed because the parents of one of the 2 sides are interfering too much, are getting too much involved, are giving their opinions. It's a good idea to help, it's a good idea to share your experience with them, advise them, but don't interfere. The Torah says, Al ken yazov, leave. You're concentrating, you're focusing on your own home. And number 3, the Torah wants us to form a very strong bond, as the pasuk says, "V'davak b'ishto." In order to accomplish that, one's mind has to be completely focused in making this bond. It cannot be pulled away in different directions. Yes, we're still obligated to honor our parents, and that always continues for the rest of our lives. But this is where our focus should be primarily, if we want to succeed. Klal Sheni, rule number 2. The Torah says, "E'eseh lo ezer," I will make for him a help. What does that teach us? That one has to remember that what the marriage is all about is not just a partnership. They're not just sharing the same bedroom. One actually needs the other. You know what I've heard from people who are very unhappy and who are thinking of divorce? I can get along just fine without my husband. I don't need him anymore. No, that's terrible. One should always feel that he needs the other. He cannot be on his own. Number 2, one needs to remember that sha'echad mashlim tasheni, that one complements the other. No one is perfect. What I'm lacking, she has. What she is lacking, I may have. So we are complementing each other. And number 3, the Torah tells us that this is an ezer. What's an ezer? A true helper is when you work together, you help each other. So the Torah is telling us, lavod betzavta, work as a unit. Mashal lemah davar domeh, how can we compare this to? To an orchestra, where there is a flute and a clarinet and a violin and perhaps a harp and an organ, a piano, a trombone, a saxophone, and a guitar, right? There's many, many more instruments. If they all work in unison, what do we get? Harmony. The Torah says, so there should be harmony. If they work together, there will be harmony. Even if the two are not so compatible. Even if the two are 15 years apart or 20 years apart. Even if one is tall and one is short. Even if one is from Uzbekistan and the other one is a Yeke from Austria or Germany. If they work together, they have common goals, they can make it work. There will be harmony. Klal Shlishi, the third rule, the Torah tells us, Lo tov heyot adam levado. It's not a good idea for man to be by himself. The simple meaning is, get married. Don't stay single. But I use that also as another important lesson. A lesson in communication. Lo tov heyot adam levado. It's not a good idea for you to live on your own, to be by yourself. Part of marriage is talking to each other. Communication. As the Pasuk says, Daga belev ish yasihena. If you have a worry, a concern in your mind, what's the best medicine for that? Yasihena. Talk it over with somebody else. What's that medication they give for people who are depressed? Prozac? The Pasuk doesn't say Prozac. What is that? Right? The Pasuk says, Yasihena, talk it over. You have something on your mind, talk it over. Communication is so healthy, it's so important. Don't think about things on your own. Share them. Talk. You're not here by yourself. You're sharing this home with your wife, with your husband, and part of a successful relationship is communication. So, Lo tov heyot adam levado, the Torah is reminding us that another important ingredient, another important rule in making this a successful relationship is to have open channels of communication. Something bothers you? Talk it over. You don't understand something? Don't guess. A lot of people have all these conceptions, all these ideas, misconceptions I should say, because they're guessing what their partner means. Ask her. Ask him. This is, by the way, a very important rule when it comes to judging people, our friends, and I eventually will talk about it more at length. You have a doubt about somebody, you can't figure somebody out, you saw him do something that you find very suspicious, you feel that this man is behaving not properly. If you have any doubts, you know what? Instead of remaining with these doubts and these suspicions, go over to him or her and ask. Many times you will find out that you were mistaken in your belief, in your suspicions. Lo haya velo nivra. It never happened. You thought wrong. You miscalculated. How would this work out properly if there was communication? So you're not on your own. Make sure that you have open channels of communication. These are just some basic rules. But as I said before, what's the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is to be happy. Everybody wants to be happy. And the rabbis tell us the only way for a person to attain happiness is to work on himself. Not to drink. Because if you drink, maybe you'll be happy for a few minutes. That's not really true happiness. True happiness is achieved by working on oneself. And when we say working on oneself, we're talking about the midot. Every human being in this world, Jew or non-Jew, has a set of midot, has a set of certain characteristics. Some are benign, if we can call them that. They're good, they're positive, and some are not so good. We can call them weaknesses. Part of his tikkun, of the neshama in this world, part of what he needs to do, he or she needs to repair, is the midot. They have to work, each one has to work on himself or herself. If we would be perfect, we wouldn't be here. We would be together with the malachim, with the angels. If we're here, it's because there's something for us to fix. And if we are able to follow that road to completing ourselves, to repairing whatever it is that we need to repair, we will achieve happiness. We will be happy. When a person has worries, the Zohar says, when he has pahadim, when he has fears, it's a siman that he has hataim, that he has sins. And that, as a result of that, he has all these insecurities and fears. Perhaps that's not the only reason why people have insecurities. Person who's lacking happiness, obviously he has no true bitachon in Hashem. His emunah is not so strong. And his midot, his characteristics are lacking. One who is shalem, one who is complete, is more confident of himself or herself, is able to relate to life a lot better, is able to deal with problems in a much more positive way, and he's less afraid to tackle any challenge. Because happiness leads to confidence, which is also bitachon b'Hashem. Bitachon atzmi or bitachon b'Hashem. One needs to be happy about themselves. Once one is happy about themselves, well, then it's contagious. It helps to make others happy. How can we make someone happy if we're unhappy ourselves, if we're sad and depressed? The direct consequence of working on oneself is what's called in Hebrew aliyah. People grow. People mature, people grow. Not only physically, not only in age, but hopefully spiritually. That's the most important growth. In order for the two to grow, in order for their love to deepen, each one on their own has to grow and to become a better person. If there is no aliyah in the relationship, there will be something called in Hebrew itnavnut, or in English atrophy. You know, the body, if it does not exercise, it becomes atrophied. In other words, there's an atrophy in the body. If you don't exercise, if it doesn't grow, it becomes stagnant, or worse, it deteriorates. So the immediate benefit of growth, of working on oneself, is that the relationship will prosper. Whoever is happy, it will be easier for him to give. It will be easier for him to speak. It will be easier for them to listen and to be patient and to understand the other individual because they're happy. Yes, what can I do for you? It's the whole attitude changes when a person is happy. He's more patient. He just has less difficulties in dealing with people. People who are, what's the word for it in English? Who are not rough, but no, people who are brusque in their nature, who are rough, unpolished, right? It's because they're not happy. They can't be happy. Somebody who's happy is calm. He's willing to listen. It just one follows the other. So the foundation is happiness, but it's the happiness of each individual first, in order for each one to be able to make others happy. So the immediate benefits of happiness is obviously that one is able to give to others with ease, without any difficulties. Because to give to others is not easy. It's not human nature to give. Human nature is to take, to want to receive. But if you're happy, it's easier to give. And you know what happens when you get used to giving? We are told that this is what brings about love. Not what you had when you were engaged, even though people call it falling in love. That's just good chemistry, good feelings, perhaps a little bit of physical attraction, and you desire someone and you want to have them. But love is much more than that. Love takes time to develop, and the most important ingredient of love is to give, is giving to that person, giving to those who we care for. That's what love is all about. We care for someone so much, we want to give to them. And when one continuously gives, even though he started off liking her or him, not so much, but a little bit, with the act, in the regular act of giving, the love will sink in. Just like parents give to their children. That is why parents love their children. Right? The connection parents have towards their children is a very deep connection only because they give to them. Not so, unfortunately, the children to the parents. Do the children give to the parents? No, not as much as the parents give to the children. So the love of a father and mother to their child is great because they are giving to him or her. I'd like to ask you a question. Since giving is important, what's the most important thing one can give to his spouse? How about a bottle of perfume? Is that important? It is, but it's not the most important. How about for the men, would you be happy if your wife gave you a wallet? A new leather wallet. Virgin leather, is that what it's called? Made in Italy. Nice, thank you for thinking of me. But what's the most important thing that you can give to your spouse? Any ideas? Well, time, okay. But it's important, but it's not the most important. Attention, important, but not the most important. Appreciation, important, but not the most important. The most important thing you can give anybody in the world is kavod. You give him respect. And the Rambam tells us what kavod means. And it's a two-way street. Kavod to the husband and kavod to the wife. וכן ציוו חכמים שיהיה אדם מכבד את אשתו יותר מגופו. Love her like you love yourself. You care about yourself, you treat yourself nicely, treat your wife nicely too. But ציוו חכמים שיהיה אדם מכבד את אשתו יותר מגופו. To give kavod to your wife, give her more kavod than you give yourself. ואוהבה כגופו. And love her as you love yourself. ואם יש לו ממון הרבה, ואם יש לו ממון, if he has money, מרבה בטובתה, then he should do more for her. Give him ממונו according to his means. לא יטיל עליה אימה יתרה, he should not scare her too much. Demand of her. ויהיה דיבורה עמה, in his speech with her should be בנחת, calmly, ולא יהיה עצוב, ולא רגזן. You should not be sad or depressed or angry. So that's the husband's obligation towards his wife. How about the other way around? וכן ציוו על האישה. The rabbis commanded, instructed the woman, שתהיה מכבדת את בעלה ביותר מדי. She should be very careful in giving the proper respect to her husband. ויהיה עליה מורא ממנו. And she should have awe or reverence for him. ותעשה כל מעשה על פיו, and she should follow his instructions and what his wishes are. ויהיה בעיניה כמוסר או מלך. He should be in her eyes like an important minister or king. And there's more, but this is the basic. The Chachamim put a tremendous emphasis on kavod. But I'm sure the men are wondering, why give the woman more kavod than oneself? Right? The rabbis tell us in the Gemara, mechabda yoter migufo, more than one respects himself. I can understand loving her as much as I love myself, but why is kavod to the woman greater than my own personal kavod? So the rabbis tell us part of the kavod of the woman is that she dresses herself. One's dress and one's clothing gives one kavod, makes them feel good about themselves. And to women it's very important, much more than to the man. The man has 3, 4, 5 suits. The women need to have 40 or 50. It's important to them. My wife put on something one day in the morning and then I see her changing. Why are you changing? Is there a stain on it? No, I have to change because we're going out again to this other event. Yeah, but why can't you wear the same thing you wore in the morning? Don't ask, she tells me. That's the way it is. You will never understand. I don't. But the Chachamim already told us. That's the kavod of the Isha. And we have to respect that. We have to honor that. We have to provide for that. Give her the money that she needs for the Hagim, for the holidays, to buy herself clothing. It's very important to her. Much more than food. She doesn't care about steak. She doesn't care about good food. She would rather have the kavod, the attention of her husband. That's more important to her. Rabbis tell us that the women are more sensitive. And because of that, one has to be extra careful. That is why it says yoter megufo. Why? Because they are more sensitive. These things mean more to them than it is to us. Quick example. You come home, your wife serves you dinner, and you tell her, you know what? I like the neighbor's lasagna a lot better than this one. You know what you just did? She won't be talking to you for the rest of the week. You just hurt her feelings. But what did I do? What did I say? I was just talking about lasagna. I was just talking about dinner. And that recipe is better. I liked it more. It makes no difference. You won't be able to justify it. You just hurt her feelings. What if you made dinner one day and your wife says, you know what, I don't like your omelet. Okay, make it however you want. We're not offended. The men are not offended as much by comments about the food. Okay, make it however you want. Next time I'll do it differently. But to a woman, certain things are very important, and if one is not careful enough, it's very easy to offend, very easy to insult them, because they're very sensitive. And that is why the rabbis say one has to be concerned about their kavod more than what is important to you. Because what's important to you is important, but not as much what is important to her. To her, it's very important, much more than what it is to you. Therefore, be extra careful. What else can one give to one's spouse besides kavod that is very healthy and very important? Somebody said time. Time is true, it's a very important thing, but that is part of communication, which I spoke about before, that an important rule in having a successful relationship is having good communication, making time for that. But I'll get back to it a little bit later on a different type of time that is very healthy. But time is true. One of the things that we can give that very few people realize this, that it's very important, is called in Hebrew mahma'ot, compliments. People like to be complimented, and the women especially so. And it doesn't cost money, you know. Just give a compliment. And the rabbis tell us it's okay, it's permissible to give a compliment even if it's not true. Even if you didn't really mean it. And the Zohar says that every morning a man should wake up and tell his wife, you are the most beautiful woman in the world. Even though that may not be true. But he should say it anyway. Because compliments, what they do is they generate affection. They generate warmth. That's what they do. They actually generate that. When somebody is complimented, he feels good. So do it. It helps. It works. Then do it. What do you care? You have nothing to lose. So one of the best pieces of advice for men and women is, don't be stingy when it comes to compliments. Give as much as you can. Because you know what happens if you don't give the compliments? She or he may get it from somebody else, at the workplace or somewhere else. My wife doesn't compliment me, my husband doesn't compliment me, and this man or this woman does. That causes problems. So compliments is an important netina, something important that we need to give. Since we're talking about compliments, so we're talking about saying things. And that's another important area, how to say things. It's a good idea to get used to telling one's spouse, I need this, instead of I want this. If you're careful with which words you use, you'll see that they have different effects. Whenever I'm not careful, whenever it happens to me that I just did not use the best expression, My wife reminds me, say please. It's important. Now, did I mean not to say please? Of course I meant to say please, but we sometimes rush and just say, please get me this. We don't say the word please, just get me this. Add the word please. Be careful with the words because words are powerful. So say, I need this instead of I want this. That will make a difference. One of my favorite that I've implemented, and that it's a good thing to do from time to time, is to say a kind word or to say a joke in order to eliminate any tension that may be around at a given moment. There is tension at times. After a long day of work, kids are not behaving themselves. There's a lot of pressure on the wife or the husband to prepare something. So that's a tense moment. Give them a tickle. Give them a tickle. Wow, what's the matter? Why are you so nervous? Everything is okay. Everything will be all right. Don't worry. Make a joke. Do something to break the tension. Who likes tension? So do something about it. And let me just say it now, because I may forget next week. Who should do it? The women or the men? Whoever remembers. However, the man should always initiate. It's easier for the man to initiate than it is for the woman. Because the woman might feel, it's coming to me. For whatever reason, she might feel because of her sensitivity, he owes it to me. Or he should do that. She may not have the strength or the courage to initiate, to do something about the marriage. Unless she's, Baruch Hashem, an Eshet Hayil, and she's gone to many classes, and she's adopted many of the techniques. Yes, but rabbis tell us that the man should be, if one has to initiate and not the two really should do it. But if one has to be, if there's one of the two that needs to do something about the marriage, first, who should be the first? The man. He should initiate. Because he's logical. He's able to approach the problem and solve it immediately without thinking too much about it. When we're talking, it helps to talk calmly. And when we criticize, sometimes we criticize. It's important how we criticize. And if somebody receives criticism, it's okay to say to the other person, you know what? You could say that a little bit differently. Instead of yelling back or criticizing the one who's criticizing, you could say the same thing in a different way if it's positive, if the criticism is positive. So it makes a difference on how we say things. Unfortunately, many of us are more careful in how we talk to our neighbors and to our friends, to our colleagues, than we are to our spouse. Because we're so used to, we feel, it's okay to talk any way you want. Feel free to express yourself, to speak your mind out. Yes, we feel free. It's okay to feel free to express yourself and to be open. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be as careful as you are when you're speaking more politely with your neighbor. Why should you be more polite to your neighbor? This is your wife. This is your husband. And it's going to make such a big difference. But we get carried away. Rabbis tell us that if one is careful in the kavod that he gives to his wife, not only is he going to gain a healthy relationship, not only will he have a beautiful home, but ena bracha shruya babayit ela biglal haisha. The rabbis tell us that the blessing in one's home comes about as a result of one's wife. Oy vavoy, one has to be very careful not to bring her to tears. Unless they're tears of happiness, of course. There are tears of happiness, of joy. One has to be very careful with that because his beracha, his parnasa, can suffer as a result of inflicting unnecessary pain on his wife. And since women are sensitive, they will cry easily. So you have to be extra careful. Not to cause that, because that can take away the beracha. Because the beracha in the Shekhinah will be in one's home if one gives the proper kavod to one's wife. You mentioned before time. It's important to spend time with each other. One of the reasons why people change, why the excitement is a little bit gone, is not only because of our routines, but also because something new has happened in our lives. Before, one was a husband and wife, and after a couple years, you're now a father and mother. There are children in the home. So the husband and wife kesher relationship is somehow has taken a back seat. Now being a father and mother means you're taking care of other people. You're dealing with something new completely. So that takes away a little bit of that tension, of the time, of the excitement. I therefore strongly recommend for the husband and wife to take time off by themselves without the children. Go away for a weekend and do it several times a year. It's hard to find a babysitter. Your mother-in-law may not agree. Your mother may not want them. You're lucky if the mothers agree. And that's the way it should be. If they want to help the young couple, they should do that for the children. Go away. Enjoy yourselves. We'll take care of the kids. Do it once, twice a year. Don't miss it. That's the best gift that you can give yourselves. And I have seen this, that if the husband and wife are able to get along just well when they're by themselves, but when they are home with the kids, they have strife, there is tension. It's not because they don't get along, it's not because they don't like each other, it's only because the kids and the routine and the work is taking a toll on their relationship. It's very demanding. You have to split yourself. If Chaz v'Shalom, the husband and wife, after leaving the home, leaving the routine, leaving the kids behind, still can't get along, that's serious trouble. They need outside help. But many times you will find that when you get away from the routine, when you spend time with each other, and you sit down and you relax, no tension, no work, no having to prepare dinners, or washing dishes, or laundry, you'd be surprised how much the woman will be calmer, and you will say, oh Hashem, now you remind me of the way you were when you were single, when we were engaged. Now, all of a sudden, this is pleasant. What happened? Nothing happened. It's the same person. You took away all that tension. You took away all that routine. That does take a toll too. So the couple is not to blame, as long as they respect each other, of course. As long as everything else is normal, it could just be that there are other things out there, other elements that are taking a toll on their relationship. So we have to do something about it. The Torah offers the mikveh that helps. They always remind us to have the kavod towards each other. Very important at all times. Open lines of communication is important. Remembering that what needs each other. All of the rules are important. But in order to rekindle the excitement, one has to be creative. To say a kind word. To, of course, buy a gift and to not forget the birthday. Chaz v'Shalom. Especially of the wives. Not the anniversary. Write a nice card. All these things make a difference. What happens, and this will finish for tonight, part number 1. What happens if, unfortunately, there are true problems? Either the two have problems, or one of them has problems. Weaknesses. A midah that is not a good midah. Not a good characteristic. How do we deal with that? Next week, B'ezrat Hashem, I believe, we'll be talking about difficult relationships, how to deal with them. But I want to finish with this point because this is something that is important in every relationship. Because I don't believe that there's any relationship that one or the two of them don't have some weakness. The reason why some relationships succeed is because they follow the rules, they know how to deal with it, they have the proper attitude, they have the kavod, and that's why the ingredients are there. But the ingredients can be there and things can still go wrong. It depends how much someone is bothered by that particular weakness. If she's not a good cook and it bothers the husband, okay, he respects her, he does everything right, but if he's very much bothered by it, that could spoil an otherwise good relationship. If he has a temper, he definitely respects her, he definitely gives her kavod, he buys her everything, but he has a temper. She doesn't know how to deal with it. It could really spoil a relationship. What do you do when there is a weakness, a problem that is identifiable? Shlomo Melech tells us in Mishleh, Sinat te'orer medanim v'akol pesha'im techase ahava. Hatred begets fights. Begets, it brings about fights. V'akol pesha'im techase ahava, and all faults and in all sins, love covers up. What does mean? What it means two things. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees that Am Yisrael has unfortunately pesha'im, it has sins. But there is ahadut, there is unity. Al kol pesha'im techase ahava. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I overlook everything because of the ahava between the Jews. If they would be be'ahdut, Hashem says, I would forgive them the avodah zarah. Even avodah zarah, idol worshipping. Why? Because they're be'ahdut. They love each other. Al kol pesha'im techase ahava. Love covers up all the sins. And the same is true in a relationship. If there is true love, then you should be willing to overlook, to ignore that one particular weakness. Try to help them, of course. Try to deal with it however you can, but overlook it. Don't let that spoil an otherwise good relationship. Because the other way around, if you don't mechaseh, if you don't overlook, then there will be sin'ah. There will be hatred. You will hate that person, something about that person. And that hatred will develop to medanim. It will bring fights. Sin'ah te'orer medanim. The hatred will bring about fights. Just for one weakness, for one problem. But everything else is right. Ask yourself, is everything else okay? Is she a devoted woman? Does she take care of her children? Okay. If she has this particular problem, so nobody's perfect. Same thing with the other way around. Is your husband a good father? Is he devoted? Yes, but he has a temper. Yeah, but what about everything else? Does he give you the time? Does he take care of your needs? Yes. So he's a great husband. What are you complaining about? Just because he has this problem? Don't overlook all the good. If there's anything that we need to overlook, it's the bad. And hopefully that bad is very little. It's not a lot. Oy vavoy if it's a lot. So the trick here is to overlook. Otherwise, if we don't ignore it, chas v'shalom, trouble happens. What happens if trouble did erupt? What do you do when there's a fire? You hopefully, if it's a small fire, you extinguish it, right? Yourself. If it's a big fire, you call the fire department. I just want to remind you, and we'll talk about that more next week. If ever there is a fire, don't go to sleep that night until you extinguish that fire. Don't go to sleep before you make up, before you reconcile your differences. There may be small fires all the time because of misunderstandings, because we said something we didn't mean, because we were not sensitive enough. Okay, fine, we all make mistakes, but extinguish the fire immediately. Otherwise, things will develop further and further, and then it will be very difficult to extinguish. Things have gotten out of hand. The love has dissipated. The excitement is gone. If you have problems, take care of them immediately and not later. Just want to remind everybody that don't think that making $1 million, getting a PhD, having a successful career is an important achievement. It's very nice. Having good children is also very nice and important. But I want to assure you that the most important achievement in life is a good, wonderful marriage. Because if one does not have a good marriage, one has nothing. If one has a good marriage, he has everything. Okay, if you have any questions, I'll take them. Otherwise, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll continue next week on how to deal with difficult issues, with problems that arise from time to time, and how to preserve this important idea that we call marriage, that we call a Bayit Ne'eman B'Yisrael. I want to remind you what we wrote in the flyer. Marriage involves preserving and persevering. Right? Two similar words, preserving and persevering. The reason I wrote persevering is because it takes persevering. We may work and work and work, and some of us give up hope after a while. in order to succeed in any relationship, if we really care about something, if we really want it, then we need to persevere. We never should give up hope. And just like a single man or woman should never give up hope in praying and asking Hashem to find his or her soulmate, never give up. If there is a problem, don't give up hope. If you want to preserve, then persevere.